I'm Noel or Noel Hidalgo. I'm fortunate enough to be a Gemini and have two names that are spelled exactly the same. I want to say welcome and thank the Internet Society of New York. So Mark Shoro wrote this really amazing book that takes in the legal history of New Amsterdam and the New Netherlands and really goes through court proceedings. And there's this fabulous story of how he was able to come through and find all of these documents. And talks about how the Lenape, which is just one of the many tribes that were in what the area that we call now Manhattan and Long Island, is that because this was such a fertile and rich environmental area, that there were many, many tribes, native tribes, coming to this area for fishing, hunting, rest and relaxation. And they were all about kind of trading, because this was the nexus of all of these different communities. And so when the Europeans arrived, when Henry Hudson and the rest of the Dutch settlement showed up, they were like, just another tribe looking to do business. And they were all about having more people come to these series of islands and to kind of indulge in the wealth and the excess and the bounty of these series of islands. Oh, watch out! And so some things that we get from the Lenape and the Dutch are the fact that the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of the press can all be traced back to the Dutch Republic. Our Third Amendment actually grew from the Spanish Catholics commandeering Dutch homes. And really, the Lenape themselves were all about making sure that we were about to do business, and that ironically enough, the New Netherlands settlement is the first settlement in the New World, not the New World, still the world. That was all about commerce and not under a religious charter. And so this has this amazing impact to where we are today with our Constitution, with the amendments that we have, and New York City government itself. And so as long as we take the moment to recognize our history, this goes back to the Native peoples. And so what I want to talk about is what is civic hacking and how it kind of relates to this whole issue of collective engagement. So Josh Tauber in, I think it's like 2004 or something like that, seemingly centuries ago, defined civic hacking as a creative approach to solving civic problems. And if you know New York City's history is very active in trying to solve a number of different civic problems. We have a long-standing history of immigration and migration. We have the young lords up in Spanish Harlem who are fighting for environmental and economic justice. We have a well-established civil rights movement, whether it's through the LGBT community, whether it's through the suffragettes. We have the civil rights movement and the labor movement, the suffragette movement, the environmental justice movement. And all of these things, in my definition and kind of like in the broader definition of civic hacking, is civic hacking. We're coming up with creative solutions to address these civic problems. Like, how do we feed children for breakfast? Well, we just start feeding them and then figure out how the government is going to pay for it later on. Thank you, Black Panthers. So other problems that have come out, particularly through the progressive movement, is the idea of we want information liberation. We want to be able to hold government accountable through the data that it is collecting on us, about us, so that way we can make sure that government is doing it in an appropriate way. New York City is pioneering in 1989 in publishing the very first public data directory. Believe it or not, this is a phone book of data sets, and you can go to the city archives and pull it off the shelf, and it's about 1.5 inch long, thick book that tells you how to file a Freedom of Information Act, or how to use the Freedom of Information Law, FOIL, and how to request a data set, which is then listed in this particular book. And so here we have the Department of the Aging. We have the application is grants management, the year it was activated in 1989, the application description, and the database contents. And in 1989, this was the future. And the idea as part of the city charter was about making sure that the people had access to government information. We're currently going through a city charter revision, and the idea was that this would be published every single year through the COPIC, the Commission on Public Information and Communications, which was supposed to oversee the city's radio stations, city's television station, as well as websites and other pieces of government information. But sadly, this was published once and never published again. Until there was a lovely group of civic hackers. A number of us started coming together and organizing under a meetup. And we said, hey, we actually want access to this information, but we want it on a website because we hear that there's this thing called the internet, which is really, really amazing, and it makes it really cheap and easy to publish information. And so sequentially, we start organizing and start advocating for the fact that there needs to be an update to this piece of legislation, what COPIC was, and this public data directory, and we get the city's open data law passed. It's Local Law 11 of 2012. And Local Law 11 of 2012 is this massive kind of chrysalis that takes entities like public personal democracy media and through its PDF and really help localize and build a hyperlocal community, which BetaNYC is just a member of, to start hosting hackathons and hack nights and really thinking through how do we use open technology and open data to start civic hacking and start improving our community. So these are some photos from the last 4 or 5 years. And so just, if we can, just what's your interpretation of civic hacking? If we could just popcorn some ideas. In other words, yell them out. Say that again? You have to start with a list of something. What is your interpretation of civic hacking? Scraping data.
Hackathon style, kind of thinking on civic problems, solutions in a short time.
Creating solutions in a short time through a collaborative, intense event.
Learning how to respond to disasters, natural and otherwise.
Learning how to respond to disasters, natural or otherwise. Making governance more reactive to the populace.
Finding new ways to use the existing city data, new interpretations of that.
New interpretations of existing civic data. Forking the government. Having the government fork you. Helping communities solve the problems that matter to them.
More linked NYCs.
More link NYCs, those are the Wi-Fi things, yes? Bypassing and circumventing the bureaucracies that hold us back. Great.
Fix the subways.
Hacking the subways.
Telling stories that inspire change or shed new insights.
Storytelling and telling stories that inspire change. Yeah? I'm saying this to make sure that the internet hears us. So.
Educate and share knowledge to solve the problems, no matter how technical you are.
So educating and inspiring people regardless of whatever condition they're in. Figuring out a way to empower them. Cool. Great. Those are all great civic hacking ideas. And with that, I want to bring up Mika Sifri, one of the co-founders of Civic Hall, to come talk about a home to civic hacking in New York City.
Thank you, Noel. It's been great to know you all these years, and folks may not realize how much of the civic hacking community in New York has been built and supported by Noel's long-standing dedication to this work, especially around the open data, open government stuff. So it's great to have you here at Civic Hall with us. How many people have been to Civic Hall before? Raise your hand. Okay, and so for some of you this is new. I'll give you a very quick description of what we are. Civic Hall is a place, a collaborative community center for people who are trying to develop civic tech or using tech for the public good. We grew out of an annual conference called Personal Democracy Forum that we still do every June, that started in 2004, and that I think was in parallel to the type of local organizing that you just heard about, was really a response to the moment that a lot of us were experiencing in that time of, oh my God, the internet is making politics more accessible, that we don't have to wait for permission to start our own campaigns or organize for the candidates who excite us, and that that whole top-down system could be something more bottom-up. Obviously, I think the optimistic moment that represented back in the early 2000s is a lot more complicated now, and we, I think, are way more aware of the negative ways that technology can be used, both to concentrate power even more in the hands of the few, and also to manipulate and potentially really damage democracies. And so this is a very different moment that we're in now than, say, 15 years ago when some people first got interested in things like civic hacking. Civic Hall has a membership of people who join and work out of the space on a daily basis. We look for people who have a commitment to working on behalf of the public good. That's really the only filter we apply in terms of joining. And you can join as an individual or join as an organization. We have more than 125, 130 organizations that are members, including city agencies, many of whom are also looking for ways to engage with the civic hacking community and build with and not just for others. This thing is our exciting news, which I don't know how many of you have been following, but literally earlier this week, the City Council voted on a lot of things, including putting a cap on ride sharing and so on. That's what got the headlines. But buried in that legislation was also approval for some zoning changes for a property that the city owns on 14th Street, just where it intersects with Irving Place, where we, in partnership with a developer named RAL, had put together a proposal to create a tech hub for the whole city of New York, right in the heart of Union Square. And this is something that is, I guess, our wildest dreams come true, assuming we can do all the hard work that gets us from a pretty picture to an actual building. But the goal here is the city asked for people to redevelop this property where P.C. Richards has its store. Do people know where that is now? And they, in their original call for proposals, they were asking just to put up a commercial building that would be a hub for early stage tech companies. So companies that are outgrowing their WeWork arrangement, but not yet ready to take a long-term lease. And the city was thinking that was what they should put at Union Square. And we came to them with a different proposal. We said, you can put up a commercial tech building anywhere you want, but Union Square is only second to Times Square as a crossroads for all the people of New York. Every subway line goes through there, and we have a big digital divide in this city. 40% of New Yorkers cannot afford broadband at home, for example. So they're camping out in front of libraries to get the free Wi-Fi after the library closes so their kids can do the homework. And we have a serious problem in that, in many ways, the Silicon Valley version of tech has only accelerated the widening of this gap, increasing inequality. And there needs to be a different approach to how people learn how to use technology, both to get jobs, but also to serve the communities that are most underserved. And what we said to the city was, let Civic Hall be the anchor of this new building. And in addition to this collaborative kind of space that we already run, we will also stand up a digital learning center and workforce development center, working with all the major nonprofit training organizations that currently teach underserved communities like immigrant communities, elderly, people with disabilities, kids in the South Bronx, how to code and design and get those good jobs. But to also do it with ethics baked in, with an attention to the dangers that unbridled use of tech can actually make things worse and not better in all kinds of ways. And the city said yes. And then we had to get it through, the community board needed to review the proposal, and we're very happy that the community board, which covers the Lower East Side all the way up through the East Village, gave its unanimous approval in support of this project. City Councilwoman Carlina Rivera has been a strong supporter, and then now, as you heard, the City Council has literally just voted to okay the standing up of this building. So the plan is we've got about 2 years to go. Groundbreaking is going to start pretty soon, probably late this fall or just at the beginning of next year. And our vision is a space like this, only 10 times as big. Okay, so 3 floors will be classrooms, and the bulk of those will be used by all of these other organizations that teach code and design. Most, if not all of those classes will be free and low cost. In addition, we're going to expand Civic Hall's collaborative space to another 2 floors, and then we're also going to build a big state-of-the-art conference center so that people who are doing hackathons or conferences, et cetera, will have a place to meet and network with each other. And the big vision, and I'll take a question. I see you have a question. The big vision for this is that bringing all of this together under one roof has synergy. That it should be possible for a working class New Yorker who's getting off of a shift at their day job to come in and take a class, or vice versa, come in, if not at the end of the day, in the beginning of the morning, and then mingle with the sorts of people like who are sitting here in this room, you who are makers already, that we want to bring these communities more closely in touch with each other.
And we're constantly working on improving our system, improving how we get more people and more projects into our pipeline to do really great work. So I'm going to pass it over to Sonia to talk about some of the projects that we have.
Is this mic working?
Sweet. Okay. These are our recurring projects. Perfect. Sorry.
after they've been on parole. So that's another project we're doing on Tuesday. And you can also donate money to us. That's a really good way to get on our mailing list. So if you really want to get on our mailing list, donate money.
We'll love you forever. Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much. And we can take questions all the way at the end.
Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent. I will tell you, it has been 5 years since we started doing Hack Nights, and I'm really glad to see that there's a whole community that has sprung up where we have left off. And now to talk about, Sonia and I and several of you others were used to meet in Blue Ridge, in Cobble Hill, and have pizza and beer and talk about hacking and it was just, like maybe 20 of us. And so it's been kind of crazy that how long it's been since we have kind of come to where we are today. So with that being said, where we are today is that 5 years ago, BetaNYC set out to do three things. We wanted to demystify this civic hacking experience and what is civic technology. We want to kind of explore what these different opportunities and solutions could be. And then ultimately, we wanted to build tools that would enable to empower different individuals. Within our first year, what the BetaNYC community, we were once known as the OpenNY Forum, and then rebranded once the governor launched the state's open data initiative called OpenNY, which a few members who, former organizers, had helped craft a policy initiative that the governor took up and then also took our name. And so we had to rebrand ourselves, and in doing that, we decided to do a listening tour, and we partnered with the former mayor, former mayor's chief digital officer, to go to all 5 boroughs and have an understanding. But this is kind of our civic hacking manifesto, the people's roadmap to a digital New York City. And so if you go to nycroadmap.us, you get access to essentially what is this thing, which was written almost 5 years ago, which outlines our 4 key values, which we see as an extension of 4 freedoms of the 21st century: the freedom to connect, the freedom to learn, the freedom to innovate, and the freedom to collaborate. And then we identified 5 policy areas. Now, you would think, well, there were probably 50 people writing this document. What type of an impact can a civic hacker really have? 5 years ago, well, we identified 34 different proposals. 14 of them were drafted into legislation. 9 of them were actually passed. So we found and discovered and passed 9 pieces of law in New York City, and then an additional 9 have turned into different public-private partnerships. BetaNYC essentially pivoted around this time period to realize that there is an opportunity to really influence and study the operations of government, and we want to not disembowel, but at least discover how it operates, and to document it in such a way that gives all of us, technologists, and new people who are coming to the city an opportunity to engage in government. And so our advocacy led to the passage of the city record online. How many of you know the city record? Raise your hand. Just so for the city record is the most important newspaper a New Yorker has never read. It is the city's change log, if I'm talking geek speak. It is the procurement intents, procurement announcements, and the procurement awards. Essentially everything that the city is thinking about doing to buy, thinking that it's going to buy, and that it has bought. It has all your hiring and firings and staff changes. So you can find out Nathan Story's salary and when he got a job increase. You can find out what events our city charter mandates that every single government agency has to publish its meetings in the city charter. It's the most important piece of 20th century technology that the city has ever produced, and it wasn't online in a machine-readable format 4 years ago. We helped to get it online thanks to Ben Kalos. The City Council introduced an API to all of its operations. So now you have the machine-readable access to the City Council's legislative database. Lastly, in the past year, we were advocating for the fact that a lot of government is moving to use these black box systems, whether it's in schools, whether it's in justice, whether it's in housing, there are algorithms that are determining people's future, and we don't have transparency around that. And so we fought with Councilmember Jamie Vaca to get some form of traction around transparency around algorithms, which is now the Open Algorithms Bill. We're not on the advisory team, but we hope to be on one of the advisory subcommittees, which gives us a 2-year roadmap to influence how the city will be first in the nation in documenting the types of algorithms it uses for decision making. So not only that was the impact on the advocacy side, when it comes down to programs, we pivoted, and there's a few members of our Civic Innovation Labs where we're going to talk about some of the tools that we've been producing. We've been hosting big scale events. How many of you have been to our National Day of Civic Hacking or a Data Jam? Raise your hand. A few of you. Great. Well, we hope to see more of those hands go up later. We've spent the last few years taking our insights and distilling them into curriculum, really, really accessible curriculum. How many of you know New York City's 311 data set? How many of you played around with it? So about half of you. So for the other half of you, we have a card game that you can play that will disassemble the 311 data set and teach you how to learn and play around with data stories. That then hops into a whole conversation around data journeys, and you can use one of the tools that we've co-created with community boards, so that way you can see the decisions that community boards make and find out the analogous 311 data. Then that teaches you how to play with Socrata and teaches you how to play with spreadsheets, and then play with census data, and then use another tool called Cardo. In other words, we want to level you up in your understanding of government information. And so what we've been doing and what we are focused on right now is working with elected officials and community boards to strengthen our democracy, and we have a number of tools around that. I'm going to speak briefly, I'm going to actually skip this slide for time purposes, but to talk about just some of the challenges and make sure that Emily Goldman can come up here and talk about one of the tools that she has to announce today. And this is not only just a lovely red pyramid of doom, it is a lovely red pyramid of fundamentally all of the challenges that we've experienced over the last year, trying to understand and how to level up city council members, their staff, the committee staff, community boards, which are 50 volunteers, essentially sometimes making good decisions, sometimes making informed decisions, sometimes not making informed decisions, and then also looking at the district staff. And so, you know, what we've fundamentally have, if you've ever worked in hacking or in technology, it's ultimately about culture change. And then where we are at the very top of it is really just data. Like, data is just information, and what's crazy is that a lot of it isn't collected for the decision making that the community boards are having to make. And so it's not just technical challenges, but there are also infrastructure challenges, and we've been documenting this on the BetaNYC blog over the last 6 months. One of the things that we have that you can find on our blog is the fact that how many of you have dealt with construction next to your apartment after hours? Raise your hand. A few of you. Well, you know that is a permit process that essentially the constructor, the person who gets a permit, they have to go to Department of Buildings, they have to file it, and they have to identify whether or not they're next to a residential building. Well, we have a tool that's been experimenting to see whether or not that flag has been checked. And surprisingly, there's a vast discrepancy on some agents checking it and saying, yes, this is true, and some saying, no, it's not true. And so we're starting to dig into the fact that community boards have to deal with this a lot in their public meetings, and we're trying to build some visual tools around it. The second one is SLAM, which is one of the cooler tools. How many of you have ever had to deal with a noisy bar next to your apartment? A few of you, right? They can be loud and rambunctious. or a restaurant that has a sidewalk cafe that is just annoying. You don't know who really to talk to, but you can call 311, and 311 makes it really, really easy to file a noise complaint. And so we've built a tool as a prototype to show that when a bar or restaurant is renewing its liquor license, that it shows up as a little red martini glass. And you can then scroll around and find which bars or restaurants have are coming up for renewal, and how many noise complaints they have. This particular image here shows you Union Pool. How many of you live in Williamsburg or have gone to Union Pool? Just a few of the hip ones that I can see, the people who have some facial hair and tattoos and piercings. Cool. Union Pool has this little outdoor space, and they're open till 4 a.m. and it's a music venue, right? So they have bands and they have a discotheque that's going at all hours, and they're a loud neighbor, and people complain about them. So this is a tool that hopefully helps community boards evaluate how bars and restaurants and sidewalk cafes are engaging with their neighbors and trying to address the fact that they are loud and obnoxious. So you can check this out at slam.beta.nyc. And we have to thank Cardo for giving us a little a grant to make this map. And then next is Tenants Map, which I'm going to bring up Emily Goldman, who works not only on our leadership team at BetaNYC, but also on the Civic Innovation Lab and Fellows Program.
Okay, so to wrap this up of our tools, Tenants Map basically started as a simple map in Cardo where we were scraping the rent-regulated buildings data from the Rent Guidelines Board. Unbelievably enough, in this age of open data, the rent-regulated building stock is still not open data. So after scraping it, turning it into a map, we used this as a prototype, talked to some community board members who felt that it would be more important to see this rent-regulated stock in the context of 311 housing safety-related complaints. So this map shows us the rent-regulated building stock all throughout Manhattan and is colored according to their volume of 311 housing-related complaints. It took several months to figure this out. Basically, additionally, thanks to the civic tech community and all the work and advocacy that it does, 311 added a new field to its data set, the BBL field, Borough, Block, and Lot, which made this joining of these two data sets much more facile. The data streams in daily, changes color according to these issues. And it's a very simple tool. All it really is the rent-regulated building stock and the 311 housing-related complaints. That's like heat and hot water, plumbing, paint, plaster, electricity, unsanitary conditions. And it's pointing to, of course, I'm sure everybody's putting this together, issues of tenant harassment and the potential for displacement. So, because the thing is that residents throughout New York City who are experiencing problems in their homes are using, I mean, this is not across the board, but from my personal experience doing research and otherwise, people do use 311 as a tool to report their concerns. So 311 has turned into a real civic tool. While it's not a panacea and there are problems with 311, we want to acknowledge that it's also enabling people to get their concerns out there and for them to be able to potentially, hopefully, work on these problems in a new way. So that's Tenants Map. And then finally, with our amazing CUNY undergraduate students, we're also working on a study that correlates housing-related 311 SRs, service requests, with lower income communities. So this came out of some of our student projects which suggested this correlation, but we are doing a statistical study now to confirm that correlation. And basically we want to, again, showcase the use of 311 for a protective device for communities who need assistance, while also acknowledging, as this BuzzFeed article has shown us here, that 311 can also be used, as this article suggests, to further gentrification through new residents coming in and making a lot of noise complaints, bringing in a more police presence, etc. So it's this very complex tool, but it's important to acknowledge that there are different ways that it can be used, and as we gain awareness of this complexity of our whole ecosystem that we're in, we hope that this will help us figure out the ways that we can make the world a better place, I guess. So we have some preliminary results which are showing a statistically significant negative correlation between income and volume of 311 housing-related complaints, and some of our students are still working on that further. But it's sort of laying the groundwork for some other work that we hope to do that kind of builds on this. So, and those two things sort of go together with the tenants map. And so that's some of our other stuff. And I think that's ending, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So we bring up the after-hour variances, SLAM, and tenants map because these are open GitHub repos, and that we're filing issues and we need assistance to help kind of fix bugs or document bugs. And since today is kind of like kicking off National Day of Civic Hacking, we are looking forward to joining our allies at Progressive Hack Night and bringing our projects to them. And BetaNYC definitely wants to be showing up as one of the partners and figuring out how we can be bringing our projects. We're going to be, in the next few weeks, documenting kind of 6 months of research around technology needs for community boards. And for those of you, how many of you attended a community board meeting or know what your community board is? Okay, about half of you. The other half of you, the most important thing that you can, like, part of the civic fabric that underpins decisions, rightly or wrongly, in the city are through community boards. And so we're going to start up an effort to get technologists and data scientists and people who are part of the civic hacking community to join their community board in one way, shape, or another. And we're going to be releasing 2 reports. One of them is going to be about tools that community boards need, and the other one is about the technology that community boards need. And this is going to hopefully influence a longer process. We've been able to convince a number of government agencies to kind of change their process. This thing called the district needs statement. Anyway, we're reshaping bureaucracy from the inside out. What is that called? We're the elephant inside of the snake. Or maybe just a snake with a really big lunch, and hopefully that's government. Anyway, bad analogy. We want to do some really quick question and answers. We have 15 minutes until Civic Hall kicks us out at 7 o'clock. We want to be respectful of that. So yeah, can I get the Mika, Visha, and Sonia and Emily to come up, and then we'll pass the microphone around. Can we do? Oh no. You can bring your wine. You're gonna do this.
Here, you can use this for yourself.
Cool. Hello.
This question's for Mika. Just wondering, I know that Perscolis is an organization that's also supposed to be getting space in that building where Civic Hall is. I was wondering if there was any formal relationship between Civic Hall and Perscolis.
Yes, Perscolis is a partner in the project, and they will be part of the Digital Learning Center. We are in the middle of figuring out exactly what each organization's needs are in terms of, do they want to stake a claim to one classroom and just use that constantly, or timeshare it, or it's complicated to figure out. And our hope is that we can also get organizations like Perscolis, et cetera, to be sharing data, curriculum, and other aspects of their work with each other. So some of this work can, in effect, be strengthened. But it's early. But yes, they've been a partner from the beginning. Yeah, they're great. Yeah.
Who's got more questions? I'm gonna do the Donahue.
Over there.
Oh.
This is a question about some of the ethical issues that were touched upon by everyone. I mean, when we're dealing with civic issues, we're dealing with ethical issues. In fact, a few times, the idea of a black box in terms of algorithms is a scary thing, especially when it's applied to incarceration or a legal issue. One of the points that was brought up about that map, about the noise complaints that can be used in one of two different ways, that really touched me in that you can have a gentrification wave come into a neighborhood and find that information about where the most complaints are made, where people have been living, nice Puerto Rican people like the ones that I came from, just playing their music and playing dominoes on the street, and then they end up getting police complaints. So at what point is there an ethical component to considering what information, how to manage information that's shared to the public that may influence the different kind of civic hacking?
So I can take the first thing is maybe we shouldn't be sending police officers, maybe we should be sending social workers. Like, why does everything need to be a law enforcement response? That's one thing that spoke to me in the BuzzFeed article that Emily referenced. The other thing is that 3-in-1, does make it in such a way that the barrier to complain about your neighbor is really, really low, regardless of whomever you are. And maybe we've made technology and noise complaints too accessible, yet it also helps us complain. If you ever lived next to a loud restaurant or bar, it helps us, So there are a number of different questions that need to be addressed. We're exploring them in 3-in-1 and the work that we're doing through our undergraduate students. And I'm going to, yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to say thank you so much for asking this question. I think that this is something that's not thought about frequently enough when solutions are being proposed to problems, who's being affected by these solutions. I have not found a great way to solve for this, but I think that the main thing to be focusing on is making sure that there is a truly diverse set of people in the room who are making decisions on whether or not to do certain projects, so that they can think through, like, oh, what if you used this to call the cops on your, like, Dominican neighbors who were just playing music loudly? But I think that this is a big problem in tech in general. But I do hope that it's eventually solved. Yeah.
And there's a number of dynamics within 3-in-1 that need to be addressed. So.
This is more like a confirmation instead of a question, but I just wanted to confirm. So when somebody opens up 311 and submits a complaint, the maps, like the tenant map that you showed us, that means that goes live as soon as that complaint is made, that feeds into the server to show on the map?
It doesn't go live immediately, but the data streams in daily, yes.
Oh, wow.
So anytime that you make a 3-in-1 service request, it streams in within 24 to 48 hours onto the Open Data Portal, and then we're taking the Open Data Portal. So we're, all the personal identifiable information has been removed from that. But Emily, can you tell specifically about the purpose of the map and why it's there to protect affordable housing? Like, those conditions tend to be used for...
Sure, yeah, in case that wasn't clear. The complaints that we're showing on that map are about lack of heat and hot water, plumbing issues, paint, plaster, mold, unsanitary conditions. When residents are calling 3-in-1 about those issues, when residents are calling 3-in-1 about those concerns, this is a signal of dilapidated conditions, negligent landlords, potentially tenant harassment, and those are the conditions that map is revealing.
Cool. Great. Other questions? Jolly.
I noticed that the new Civic Hall is on the same block as Tammany Hall was. Is that how the city comes to still own the property?
I have no idea the answer to that question. It's also next door to the old Palladium, I think. So maybe there's some good karma there. There was a question over here, no?
Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, just regarding the tenants map, right now it seems like it's only dealing with Manhattan. Are there plans to expand it?
Yeah, I think so.
We've had a hell of a time to scrape a number of different data sets to get into Manhattan and to do Manhattan. And so now that we have the scaffolding in place, we hope to be able to support it to do a little bit more. I'm going to go here and then back there.
What are the tech or data skills and requirements for participating in some of your open source projects? What's the stack you use, and what are sort of the kinds of skills you're looking for?
I mean, so the woman who has built those 3 tools largely, it's a collaborative effort, but she's just got serious data science chops. That's what, as far as I can tell, those are really the skills that she has learned and that we would be looking for more of in the future. She's leaving us in January, sadly, so.
CSS, HTML, right now it's an HTML page, and it's CSS and some data science and data scraping, so.
Hi, can you talk a little bit about the timeline for some of these projects? Is it on the order of weeks, months, years?
Months.
Months, okay.
And yeah, a few months.
There's a question over there.
So it's kind of a question for everybody there. What has been, over the past few years, how has the cities and counties and even local city councils responded to making this data easier? Because you're still talking about scraping data from PDFs, but that data is in a database in a very easily accessible format, just beyond some brick walls inside City Hall or somewhere. Have you guys made any progress in getting the city IT department to just make this easier and working with them?
I mean, I know they're trying.
Yeah.
Right? The city's IT department doesn't make all the decisions within each agency, and each agency collects all the data that goes into the database. So sometimes they don't have a say over it. I don't work in Do It, and I don't know, but just from the outside, that's what I've heard.
This is
You work at Do It?
I'm sorry?
You work at Do It?
No.
This is a great opportunity to plug the city's open data team meeting on a quarterly basis here at Civic Hall. Next Wednesday, it's going to be a panel on transportation that's going to have hosted by Sarah Kaufman from the Rudin Center. TLC is going to be here. That's a Taxi and Limousine Commission, not the band. And a few other Department of Transportation is going to be talking about the kind of transportation data. And so that happens quarterly here at Civic Hall, sponsored by Esri. And then there's also going to be a class on Esri on how to use open data within the Esri platform beforehand. My take on it is that it's a long, ongoing conversation. It's over the last 4 years, we've passed 5 new pieces of legislation that focused on strengthening the city's open data law. But laws, as we've seen with COPIC, which is a charter mandated to meet at least once a year, which supposedly is supposed to be maintaining the data dictionary. And the data dictionary has only been published once since 1989. New York City can ignore the laws that it passes, and so it takes an engaged constituency to hold the city accountable to enforce the laws.
If I can add one other thing to that, it also takes our elected representatives being more tech fluent, and some of that will take the time of turnover and electing new ones, and the other is about educating them and getting involved on their staffs. Ben Kalos, Gail Brewer, they've both been real champions, I think, and get it. The city council recently adopted a more open, engaging platform for understanding what they're up to, which David Moore, raise your hand please, and his Councilmatic platform is what's powering that. So there's progress. It's still absolutely, there are whole swatches of important data that we shouldn't have to scrape. But I think, you know, compared to where we were, there are now people in government and in the elected offices who get this and who can also be champions to push further. So it's an unfolding process. New York City is better than most cities, absolutely, when it comes to opening up its data.
Great.
Hi, I don't want this to be too loud. Yeah, so I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and I've always been interested in trying, because I'm a technologist. I've got a background in cybersecurity. I'm a programmer. You know, I have seen that, you know, our officials aren't exceedingly literate on technology. And it's been challenging because I don't know how I can contribute to that. I don't know, you know, it's easy to get involved with a local political group and just be a member and just, you know, tell people, yeah, I know about tech or something like that. But getting to the point where, you know, there's a group that regularly tries to educate officials on specific issues, you know, I've never heard of a group like that. I don't know if it exists. Is there anything that I can do on that, in that particular regard?
On cyber?
Well, on cyber, I think I would have a pretty extensive history of working in cybersecurity, but you know, on any tech, on anything.
You want to jump on that? I'll take it.
Go, take it.
Yeah. So look, the answer is a lot of it is you know, picking your battle and then fighting it for a while. For example, BetaNYC is very involved with Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer's office. They have an ongoing daily relationship. And I mean, she's been, I think, a leader as well in educating herself about what you need to know. I would say, that said, we, across the entire field, there's been more emphasis put on open it up, open the data, open the government, make it more interactive compared to cybersecurity. And that is a little bit of a, like, we're all walking on thin ice kind of problem. And so, you know, figuring out how to elevate that issue, I think, is an important one for all of our organizations to spend some time on. We may be too late, you know, in terms of the sorts of things that we could do. But we, you know, here at Civic Hall, we have a number of city council members. Corey Johnson's office is a member. Brad Lander's office is a member. Ben Kalos is a member. Noel, you want to add to that? I mean, I think it's a really good question.
We met with 26 city council member offices in the funding season, essentially educating them about the programs that we offer and the services that we've done with the Manhattan Borough President's Office and how we want to move out to the other 4 boroughs. We've done one class inside of 250 Broadway. We've done a number of classes at the municipal building at 1 Center Street, where we've educated community board members from across the 5 boroughs, as well as city council members from across the 5 boroughs. So we're stepping into that direction. That's definitely been one of the kind of like the blind spots within our municipal ecosystem. It affects a lot of municipal decisions, from do it to agency procurement to agency technology creation. And so we've kind of slowly been taking the little steps that we can to educate ourselves so that we don't look like idiots when we go there and start talking about technology. But it's a longer process. I would say that the way for you to get involved is to understand what goes on within a community board as the very civic fabric. The second one is the Police Precinct Council. The third is a Community Education Council. Those are 3 voluntary boards that are made up of citizens that help make decisions. And then bring your tech skills there, and then bring those people to Progressive Hack Night. Or to read kind of the Civic Hall, come to Civic Hall and participate. And so it's got to be a little bit of a you going to them and them coming to us. And I think within the next 5 years, it'll be a significantly different place. It's 7 o'clock now.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah.
You said you were accepting feedback about Civic Hall, or you wanted input. How do people go about doing that?
Okay, so a number of ways of doing it. Obviously, you can email community@civichall.org, and that gets to all the staff. You can talk to me. You can talk to Savannah Batalich, who is our Director of Education, Training, and Events. You can write us a letter on paper, and you can tweet at us. There are any number of ways. Since we're almost about to end, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, we recently, you may have noticed, we have books up on these shelves over here, which are kind of, interesting things to read, and they get donated and they slowly leak away. But we recently got a couple of boxes of books donated to us by a writer friend who was downsizing, and there were a whole bunch of books in the junior room over there that on your way out that you're free to take, because we don't have room to keep them all. We're eventually going to donate them, but if you're looking for a good novel to read on the train ride home, please avail yourself. You'll find that one box is all about death and dying, because this is someone who wrote a book about called The Good Death. So if you're interested in that subject, there's plenty of things to read there. Noel, you want to take us out?
Yeah, thank you, Civic Hall and Mika, for hosting us. Really appreciate it. I know it's at 7 and we're supposed to...
You can hang out for a little bit to
yeah.
Finish the pizza, and we'll get you out of here in 15, 20 minutes.
So I want to say thank you, Mika and Civic Hall, for hosting us. Thank you, Progressive Hack Night, for joining us. And I encourage you to go to the Progressive Hack Night. And then I'm going to actually let Emily Goldman close us out with whatever statement.
Thank you. Noel's probably like, what's she about to say? So I would like to just have to acknowledge all this discussion of 311. It's very important to acknowledge that the 500,000 residents across New York City who live in the New York City Housing Authority complexes, those complaints about their homes are not going into the 311 system. So that's another great civic tech project to be aware of and to think about. But I just wanted to make sure that that was acknowledged due to the discussion of 311. Thank you.
So, thank you.